Yes, I have a question for Romano Prodi about Libya. Two questions actually. So first, is the Western military strike affecting the rest of the region, and what's going on? Like I think about Tunisia and Egypt. And second, if you could comment about the weird behavior that Italy has been having about this, because we've seen that France and UK are really aggressive, and Germany is not aggressive, and it's not clear what is Italy up to.
Look, I am always reluctant to talk about Italy. But no, on the first part of the question, the military strike clearly has made a lot of consequences in all the area, even outside Libya. For giving you an example, 38,800 Chinese have been brought out of Libya in a few days. So you have the consequence. Workers, flood of workers, they had to come back to Egypt, and this is the list of the consequences. And they helped to put in disarray even more Tunisia and Egypt, because of this situation. In such a way that we never in Italy never had any immigrant from Tunisia, and now it's an invasion of people from Tunisia. Tunisia, for all of us, was the country in which there was some sort of economic and social equilibrium, and so we didn't have any problem about any idea of a possible flood of Tunisia. Our fear was Africans coming through Libya to Italy, and this was the attention of the government to make an agreement with Gaddafi in order to stop that, or from, let's say, Eritrea, Ethiopia, in the same, let's say, with the same origin from Libya to Italy. And now, the consequence of this bombing is that all there is this flow of people, and the consequence of the Tunisian crisis is that people who have never come to Italy now is coming to Italy. Concerning the Italian policy, look, I think that I was telling my government, not my government anyway, the Italian government has in the beginning under-evaluated the situation, and so they were thinking to a short, enduring problem, and so they did not heavily engage. But public opinion, as all European public opinion, went in favor of the revolution, let's say, against Gaddafi. So the government, in some way, was obliged, like in France, to take a position in favor of the new. Then, it is taken a great preoccupation, the French leadership and the American prudence. And so inside the Italian government there was a debate, inside the Italian public opinion, a debate whether it was convenient to follow blindly this French initiative, And so now this is the reason why Italy is part of the, let's say, of the alliance, but not so active member, and less and less outspoken vis-à-vis Gaddafi, much more prudent than he was in the first time. This is the Italy situation. Also because, Italy is certainly the country that will suffer more from any event in Libya. I remember you that Libya is the only country in which Total is not working, there is a fact. You know, I simply analyze the situation. You know, it's
an interesting factoid. It's an interesting factoid, you know.
It's an interesting factor, you know, but not of causation, but of having some sort of
moving in the same
general
direction.
opinion that, you know, that work to change the stability of the area, you know. And then this is the reason why now the Italian government is, of course, loyal to the alliance, but absolutely much more prudent than it was before. And I think they are much repentant to have been so quick in deciding, because if Italy should have taken a German-type position, they could have been mediator in the situation. Now it's impossible that Italy can make any mediation in this moment. So to come back in the same position it was before without a mediation will be very much impossible. So if you ask me who is in the better situation now for Libya, my answer is Turkey and China. These are the players who can work more freely than all others. You know, this is what I think. But now the Americans are still, you know, we cannot write a book about that. Too soon.
So what you're telling us is that the entire thing, the crisis, the Libyan crisis, the airstrikes, weren't actually invoked just to distract us from Berlusconi's trial. There goes my pet theory. We have time for a couple of other questions. Anyone else would like to ask a question?
Because it is impossible to create such a big event.
Not for Berlusconi.
A while back, I took the somewhat radical step of emailing my congressmen and senators about whether or not the United States is going to take a stronger stand in some of the demonstrations in the Middle East. One of them actually got back to me over spring break, thanked me for my comments, but then said that, like, Robert Gates was talking to, I asked him specifically Bahrain, he was talking to, he emailed me back and said that Robert Gates was talking to the leadership in Bahrain, but that the United States and Bahrain still had many shared goals, one of which was stability in quote marks. Professor Blyth, I know you've talked in your work about the importance of, I guess, new ideas taking over the discussion and the role of actors in bringing those ideas into, well, in your work you talked about like the economic realm with the rise of neoliberalism, but what actors would bring some new perspective on what U.S. goals in the region are, as opposed to just looking at stability and focusing on that as an overriding goal?
There's a very interesting piece in this month's Foreign Policy by a guy called Alex Cooley. It's actually Alex Cooley and Dan Nexon. And they talk about where the Americans are invested in this region. And of course there's oil interests, just put that on the table. The other one are bases. Very, very big military bases. And once they pulled out of Saudi, where did they go? Was it Bahrain? So these suddenly become very, very important strategic hubs for the United States. Then they become politicized. And what Cooley has a fantastic book on this called Base Politics. And what he notes is that whenever there's some kind of revolution, democratic upheaval, revolt against the regime, doesn't matter who is running the show, the American base becomes politicized. And if the regime survives, the rent goes through the roof. And the costs of maintaining the base go through the roof. And the renegotiations get more complex and all this sort of stuff. So one thing is the American basing policy in this region, which we haven't spoken about, is going to get a hell of a lot more complex because of all these things that are going on, whether they end up being full revolutions or not. That one's a given. So the new actors, one of the new actors will be the Americans themselves in a way that they don't want to deal with because of the fact of their bases around them. The other thing that I think is quite interesting about this, and this speaks to what Romano was saying about the role of networks, social media, the internet, etc. And this speaks to my interest in sort of, let's say, the non-material factors in politics. You can't do what you could do 30 years ago as a regime. You just can't. Something has changed in the world, in the environment. There's an old philosophical problem called Hume's little finger. So David Hume has this line about, oh, I cut my finger, that matters to me more than the death of, I think it's 100,000 Chinamen, is the quote. Because it's so distant, it's so remote. By the in Hume's day and age, by the time you hear about it, it's 3 months ago. Who cares? My finger hurts now. Hume's little finger is instant. It's in your living room. it compels action out of David Cameron. It says opportunity to Sarkozy. And it's instant and it touches us in a way that this hasn't happened before. And I think that social science will talk about norms or some kind of concept like this, but there are basically these non-material but very causal elements in the world now, which are much more present than they used to be, that act as tripwires and act as channels of action in a way that they didn't before. And I think that what we're seeing as this plays out, for the Libyan example is a great example, is you have to intervene.
Yeah, but
We don't even know who the we is, and yet we have to intervene.
for Sarkozy, it's been a great occasion to get out of a corner in his internal policy. I mean, it was a great occasion. You know, France again.
Force majeure, etc. Absolutely.
Liberty, freedom.
Well, why David Cameron? What on earth are the Brits doing there? He had to do it. Why did it? Was it the decent thing to do? The decent thing to do is to walk away. That's what the Brits always do. But that's changed.
But you made the question. What could change? What could change the condition of people? You know, look, there is no alternative. Whether if there is not a quote Marshall Plan, let's say an engagement, joint engagement, Europe, United States, and China, there is no hope of a, let's say, quick improvement.
Or even, as you were saying, stability.
Yeah, of stability. Because you know, and there are things to do. You know, there is a problem that nobody touched, the Nile water. Now you have a division between South Sudan and North Sudan. The Nile water in the Treaty of 1924, if I remember well, they have been allotted to Egypt and Sudan in the most part. In this moment, we have to renegotiate it. Ethiopia has already decided to multiply by 10 this irrigation. The irrigation systems are absolutely irrational. The Nile River arrives dry to the Mediterranean. So Egypt imports 80% of its food. Somebody says 85, I say 80 to be prudent, you know. So in this situation, if there is not a war engagement, you know, simply you cannot create 1 million jobs per year or even less, neither the half of that, you know. And of course, with this intervention, but like in the Marshall Plan in Europe, you can also legitimately dictate the rules, or some rules for the market, for let's say behavior. You know, if you do that, you can do that. Otherwise, as I told before, I am a little pessimistic, and I see that there will be a military regime corrected by some intelligent opening up, but nothing more. You know, this is what I think. And there is no proposal of this intervention. You know, there is nothing similar to what America has done, United States has done in 46, 47. You know, and this is the problem that is similar to that.
And on that truly depressing note, I'd like to thank you all for coming in.
We can do it.
No, we can do it. Whether we choose to do it is a
From
different
the
thing.
financial point of view, we can do it. We can do it because the cost of these bonds, you know, is more than a possible flow of funds that we spend in the other direction.
Yes, but we're more concerned with cutting the budget for national public radio. That'll solve all the problems. Thank you very much for coming, and great conversation.